are here today discussing the roots of anti-Semitism, and we have with us again Mr. Joseph Atwill, who wrote a book called Caesar's Messiah, which deals with the Roman origin of Christianity. And I'm glad to have Mr. Atwill back. Thank you for being here again.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
And for those of the viewers who've missed out the first couple of episodes of this, I'd like you to briefly go into the background of your book, Caesar's Messiah. What is the main thesis of your book?
I'm happy to do that. The main thesis is simply that the Gospels were created by a group of Roman Caesars, the Flavians, and that the character Jesus essentially is a mythologic character, like Hercules. The Gospels were created because the Flavians had been engaged in a 100-year, well, the entire war took 100 years, struggle with a messianic movement of Jews in Israel. And they decided to create an alternative religion that would be a pacifistic version of Judaism that would cooperate with the Roman Empire. So that is the basic thesis of the book, is that the Gospels were produced by Rome and were done so as a kind of military, psychological operation. That's the primary thesis. But perhaps a more interesting aspect of the book is that the Gospels themselves are not simply the story of a pacifistic Messiah, but in fact are directly linked to Titus Flavius's military campaign. In other words, all of the events of Jesus' ministry are based upon the events of Titus's campaign, and were in fact a kind of prophecy of that campaign.
I see. Okay. Well, can you give us a little more background on the war between the Romans and the Jews?
Sure. The war began because the Jews refused to worship Caesar. Throughout the Roman Empire, every imaginable kind of religion was permitted. The only exception to that was you had to permit the worship of Caesar in the temples. The Jews, because of their monotheistic background, just couldn't abide with this and kicked the images of Caesar out of their temple. And then this led to Nero inviting or ordering Vespasian into Judea and to subdue the messianic movement. So the first point that someone really has to recognize, and it's strangely not well understood by the general populace, is that there was a messianic movement in Palestine at the time that Christianity is supposedly emerging, which is completely militaristic. It was the basis of the rebellion against the Roman Empire. And this point is critical in understanding the era and understanding the religious context that Christianity comes from, because the people in this movement were Christians in the sense that they followed a Christ. The word Christ simply means Messiah. So that for one thing, when you discuss Christians being taken to Rome and killed in the Colosseum, when people criticize my theory, one of the things that they often bring up is that, look, the Romans were attacking the Christians. They were, killing the Christians. How could they possibly be promoting Christianity? And the reason they even ask the question is because they are sort of unfamiliar with the history, that there was a movement of Christians that was militaristic, that the historians of the era record as having been captured, being brought to Rome, and actually killed in the Colosseum. So that's the real Christian-Roman relationship, is one of a military movement and an occupying army.
So you're saying that the Christians who were persecuted were the messianic Jewish movement?
Exactly, and you see, even you can see in your question that it's it's difficult even to talk about it because of the semantical problem of what the word Christian means. But that's exactly what I'm saying, is that the one of the elements of the creation of Christianity, that the Roman Jews, was to essentially steal the history of the real messianic movement. In my book, I show that, for example, the apostle Simon or Peter, his history being taken, to Rome and being executed, is actually stolen in the Christian Gospels. They take that character and make him an apostle of the Christ. And at the end of the Gospels, Jesus predicts that Simon is going to be taken to Rome and given a death to glorify God. And this is literally true, but the individual that he's speaking to is not, at that particular moment anyway, a Roman Christian, but he's one of the Jewish Christians who is in fact fighting against Rome. The Gospels are very delicate literature, very, very finely tuned literature. One of the purposes is to try to absorb the history of the real messianic movement and make it the history of Christianity that is being controlled by Rome, so that it makes more believable in terms of its historical basis.
Okay, so who were the apostles?
These are images, literary images of the Maccabees. If you look at the names of the apostles, you'll see that the names of the Maccabees pop up. You have Simon, John, Judas, Matthew. And what the Gospels are doing is they're trying to show that this history of the Maccabees, who were essentially the family that was leading the struggle against Rome, became these docile, pacifistic followers of the Prince of Peace. The purpose of the Gospels is, on one level, is to simply try to pacify the Messianic movement, which was militaristic. And so that's why they borrowed these histories. They kind of, they used some of the truth, and then they also added on the version of reality that they wanted, so that the eventual followers of the religion would be pacifistic and pay their taxes.